Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to Healthy U. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm so happy to be back today with Avdeep Bahra. I think this will be our third podcast together. And you know what I'm finding is I almost like having co-hosts. So that's the way I feel about it goes with Avdeep. So I was talking to her. She had recently been doing some activity on Facebook, and we're friends on Facebook, so it's very nice. And then I was thinking of the same thing. So I'm going to call this podcast the Honesty Podcast, and we'll discuss what that sort of means for both Avdeep and me, and why I say that. But I recently just got back from being able to speak at the University of Auburn Anti-Bullying Summit, and this was one of these goals I had because I actually, when I was at a very low point, when I was actually at my lowest point, I was invited to speak up where my bullying happened in Lexington, Massachusetts, and they were going to pay me $3,000 to go do it. And I couldn't do it. I just could not get out of my funk, and I was afraid and had anxiety and all of these things. And then this was sort of this goal that happened, almost 6-7 years later, to be able to go do it. And I spent $1,000 of my own dollars to do it instead of getting paid $3,000, but it was worth every penny because I conquered this thing that had haunted me. So I thought it would be cool to bring Avdeep on because we've been able to connect together and talk about sort of how we become honest about these things that happen to us. I even hear myself and I say low instead of I had a mental illness, and as I said at the event, I had one. I don't necessarily have it today, and I don't have it today. And I think that's an important thing, is to break these stigmas. So let me introduce Avdeep in so we can talk. So Avdeep Bahra is an occupational therapist, and she uses various mindfulness-based techniques, which I also believe very strongly in, to enable clients to overcome self-limiting beliefs and thoughts, as I was having. She guides clients to work through feelings of overwhelm, stress, frustration, isolation, and more. And Avdeep has an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's in occupational therapy, which is why she's so good at talking about it. But she's also one of the people that is out there being honest about her own feelings. So, Avdeep, as always, welcome to the show. I don't really think you're a guest this time. I think you're a co-host. So,
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. It's an honor to be back here again, and I'm very grateful for you for inviting me again to have these conversations.
Yeah, I was just so impressed with what you were doing, or what you've been doing recently, which is, coming out of sort of what I call the shadows. I think we both are trying to make a difference in the world, and sometimes, because of what we do, people don't always understand that, one of the reasons we do what we do is because in many cases we've been there, or sometimes are still there. And I still remember to this day asking my therapist when I was talking to him, I'm like, why do you do what you do? Why do you do this? And he just looked at me and he said, you know why I do. And I had all these people coming up to me saying, why do you do bullying recovery? Why do you do this stuff you do? And I said, you know why.
Right. Then, we all have our why, exactly. And that's why it's so meaningful to us too, right?
Right. And so it made me start thinking about this idea of bringing that honesty out. And I think people are afraid that they're the only ones going through something, or that even the people that they go to may not have the empathetic understanding of what they're saying. And the people are out there. I think we're out there, and part of it is the challenge of finding the right people. You know what I mean? So the person that's best suited to help you, that might be a coach like me or an occupational therapist like you, is someone who has the empathy to understand this is what it feels like.
Exactly.
And so I don't know if you want to share with the audience what you were doing, but you were doing videos the other week, and they were just fascinating. How, because I so I wrote this article for the Mighty, and I'm a big fan of the Mighty website, which is all about people talking about trying to break the stigma of these mental illness or even physical illness. And the whole site is set up that way for people to be able to open up and talk about these things so that other people can read and understand. So I wrote about being an extroverted introvert and highly sensitive male, both of which are true diagnoses. And I'd almost, tell me if I'm totally wrong to say you're an introverted extrovert, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
or at least to
definitely.
me, you are.
Yes.
So it's
You're
kind of
right.
the opposite, where I have these introversion feelings, right? But I like to be extroverted, but it wears me out. Versus you wanting to be extroverted, but you have more of this introversion feeling. So I thought it would be fun to talk about that and how you came to the point of making these videos or deciding you're going to do this. You're going to, break down this barrier that you were having.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, it kind of comes back to what you mentioned is why do I do this? Why do you do this, right? I mean, for me, I was never one to speak up, let alone be seen. So I felt actually very lonely going through my journey and my healing. So a big part of why I share on social media and very honestly and vulnerably at times, including my videos, is because everyone's going through similar things. And I know I was very lonely, and I do not want other people to feel that way. So that's one of my big reasons, my big whys for doing it, because people realize, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm going through the same things. And I get so many emails back now or comments saying, I'm so grateful you put that out there. I've been through that, or I can relate. And it gives people that opportunity, that window to also open up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I know I was mentioning to you before the show, and I'll share it here. So writing for the Mighty, that was one of my goals. I've just started to really enjoy writing, and I want to write for other websites sometimes that I feel get more attention than I can possibly get out of bullyingrecovery.org. So I wanted to write for the Mighty. It was kind of that goal. It's like the Huffington Post, right? People want to write for the Huffington Post. So I wrote this piece, and I was genuinely honest, to a point where it was tough to even write it, I would say, for me. But I had read a bunch of other pieces, and I felt this was a voice that needed to be heard, this idea of the introverted, extrovert, highly sensitive male, and how hard that is in society, because it really is very unmanly in the societal norm. And so I wrote this piece. They published it, and then the shock came to me when the editor who edited my piece, so it's just like a newspaper, they have a full staff, and their editor was given this piece by the managing editor because they could identify they knew that person would identify with what I was saying. So that editor actually wrote me a personal email telling me how grateful they were for me being honest, right? Just like you're saying. And it shocked me. It just shocked me because, I think that's why I wanted to do this podcast, is to say, I'm not hiding, and I did for years, and I'm sure you probably did too.
For sure.
We hid. We thought we were the only ones. I remember one of the funniest things that happened to me, funny looking back, was I had an anxiety about going to the barber, because when they put that thing around your neck, to sort of protect you from getting hair on you, I felt claustrophobic. I would have a panic attack. And I'm like, I got to be crazy. I can't go to the barber because I'm having this. And so I had gotten one of my self-help books about anxiety, and it had a passage in there that said, some people even have anxiety when going to the barber and having their hair cut. And I thought, oh, I'm just so normal. I'm just like
Oh, you're
everybody
so
else.
normal. Oh, I'm so glad you're saying this because I've experienced anxiety going to the dentist just from the
Hmm.
needing to lie down, right?
Oh,
Be in a
everybody.
vulnerable position. Like many people don't realize that's why the dentist also bothers them, right?
Right. Well, sure. And doctors and
Yeah.
I mean the dentist. It's really about that vulnerability of being trapped. Right. Your mouth is
Mm.
open,
Mm-hmm.
and they always talk to you like they're and you can't answer them.
Right.
But these are all real anxieties, real traits, and we have them, and we can defeat them. Obviously, you work to defeat these things, but you also have to understand that you're not alone. I wasn't alone, and I think that's the eye-opening thing when you are honest. So going back to the honesty, every time I've been honest, like when I had a depression, and when I told my friends that, my some of my friends came back and said, "Me too."
Mm-hmm.
And how
That's
shocking was that, you know?
that's amazing. Yeah. I think it's going back to, when we're honest and open, it helps break that stigma too, right?
Yeah.
And when people are saying "me too," there's also a lot of. I think there's a lot of. You mentioned when you had that opportunity back in Lexington and you were being paid, but that time you weren't ready for it.
Right.
But then now you are ready to speak. Recently, it just reminds me that even becoming honest and vulnerable and authentic comes with sort of accepting who you are as well
Mm-hmm.
and being
Mm-hmm.
okay with it. And also, as you let go of, I think, shame, because I
Right.
think a lot of people have that too. And when we're able to let go of that shame and guilt of having a mental illness or having been through bullying or abuse or whatever it may be, it also becomes easier to share honestly with others because we've dropped that mask.
Yeah. And I don't know if you find this, but I find as I'm willing to be vulnerable. And again, this is really easy. One of the things I always want to say is I think as we get older, we're less afraid to be vulnerable, because we lose that sort of that care of, well, some of us do. I think there are others, of what other people think of us. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
nearly as worried as when I was a teenager. So asking a teenager to truly be vulnerable, I think, is a lot harder than asking an old man like myself or something. But 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 that vulnerability and that understanding of not being alone, I think, is the key element. And knowing that, I would say 99.9% of the time, anything that someone else might be going through, someone else has gone through before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I believe this honesty, this breaking this stigma, that I was holding on to. I mean, in 2007, if I hadn't been honest about being an adult who was still suffering with bullying, scars from bullying, I mean, I had people come out of the woodwork all over the place, and then they'd start diagnosing it. Then they say, "Oh no, this is a real thing,"
Mm,
and it changed everything. And
right.
that's just from people being honest instead of, one of the things I was saying back then was, think about it as a parent, and this was a perspective I was taking. As a parent, your child comes home and they say they were bullied, and as a parent, you're going to be a sympathetic, not empathetic person naturally, and you're going to say, "Oh, let me either go to the school or call somebody or do something." But the last thing you're thinking about saying is, "You know what? I was bullied too."
Right.
And I think in many cases that's what the child would like to hear, but is the hardest thing for us to communicate, right?
Very
That
true.
puts us in a very vulnerable spot.
Yeah, definitely in the parent-child relationship. I can't
Yes.
imagine, yeah, many parents doing it that way.
So as you were going through your exercise, and maybe you can explain real quickly what you were doing on Facebook and how you were using the video, the new sort of live video method. that Facebook has to kind of, I don't know if you want to call it an experiment, or to experience sort of that breaking of that, what was probably some form of an anxiety or release for you, to say, I'm going to conquer this, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, being on video, being seen and heard. We can write posts, we can put pictures, it's one thing, right? But putting your face out there, speaking, being seen, and then I also tend to write in addition to my video. It was quite the challenge, because that's something I always hid from, but it also was very empowering in some ways as well. By just seeing that you're able to do it. And it goes back to, some of the fears that one has to conquer, and doing that, or I had to conquer anyway, was exactly what you said earlier on. When you're speaking to someone in person, you can have a sense of how they're reacting, what they may be thinking, their body language, what they might say back to you. But doing video, especially live video, you're really just putting yourself out there in terms of whatever, I want to share. And I have no idea how people are reacting. So that fear of, oh my God, what are people going to think, is even more amplified in some ways. Ironically, you think it wouldn't be, but it is. But it's like you said, you get to this point where what I want to share with people and the value I know it can add for people is way more important to me now than worrying about what people will or won't think about it either. And some people will resonate with what I put out there, and they'll love it, and some people won't, and that's perfectly fine as well, right? But for me, it was just more important to get my message out there, and to get my message out there. And I find it therapeutic too. I'm on a high after I've done my videos. I'm generally on a high, and I'm at a place now in my own healing journey where I do love and accept myself. So when people say to me, they're like, can you watch your videos? And are you okay with them? I would feel mortified watching my video. And I actually watch my videos and I like them. So it's such a nice place to be, where finally you feel good about yourself, right? Versus putting yourself down or
exactly. It's really accepting that. And it's what I've been saying, accepting that life is really a balance. I always go back to yin yang because it's the easiest thing for people to picture. But there is no happiness, there is no sadness, there is contentment in life. It's a balance of 50-50. If you're really lucky, maybe it's a balance of 55-45. But it's a balance, and it's what I call now contentment. So if every day you can, every day doesn't suck, every day isn't great, it's just to be content, and to, I recently took a trip overseas and to a very rainy place, and we knew it was going to rain, but I didn't know it was going to rain. And you learn, they call it liquid sunshine over there. And that's that contentment, right? They've given up trying to battle the fact that it rains all the time. I was in Ireland and Scotland, but they just call it liquid sunshine, and that's I thought that was really cool. Like, that's the kind of stuff that resonates with me when people conquer these things that would upset them. Glass half full, glass half empty. But we got to take a quick break. But when we come back, I'd like to talk about a little more about how other people might find ways to be honest without necessarily being as far out there as you and I choose to be, because we've made conscious choices, but how other people can do it and still get a satisfying feeling. So if that's cool, we'll be right back with Avdeep Bahra, where we're talking about being honest. This is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy You. Thanks very much, and we'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here with Avdeep Bahra, and we're talking about being honest. This is sort of my honesty podcast, and why, what we get out of kind of revealing these things that I probably would have called them weaknesses about myself at one point, but I don't. I think of them as strengths now, and I think of them as authenticity of myself. And so we were talking about that, of deep, about the importance of, I think, I always talk about it. It's called the authentic self, and how many times we want to please others, so we cover up what we need or what makes us happy in order to try to make someone else happy, which I think science has told us is a failing endeavor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So,
yeah.
So what made you turn that corner? Like, what point did you go, you know what, I've got to find what makes me happy and make sure that, we talk about it a lot, about wanting to be around people that make us feel good versus, I think when we're younger, we just want to be popular, or we just want to be, in some cases left alone, not be picked on or whatever, versus when we get older. And the problem can be that once we develop these, what I call habitual ways, we end up falling into the trap of not identifying ourselves, not being our authentic selves and who we want to be. And that puts us in a very unhappy place.
For sure, Alan. I think for me, the turning point there've been probably many turning points over the last 4 or 5 years when I just hit a point where I was experiencing so much fatigue and many other issues, which were probably all related to mental health as well, and realized I was playing all these roles for everybody else. Not that that's wrong, but playing the role of an occupational therapist, a mom, a wife, a daughter-in-law, a daughter, and trying to make everybody around me happy, all at the expense of, just being myself, and realizing how empty I felt by not being myself. And I think there was many turning points where just with awareness and I think meditation helped me a lot too in hindsight, but realizing that I'm lost. Where am I? Where did Avdeep go? Avdeep that was happy just being whoever she wants, saying whatever she wants. And so it was a journey over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And, thinking, okay, I don't always have to make everybody happy, and I don't always have to say the perfect quote unquote thing. And I think that's where my videos and my social media honesty is coming from, because I don't have to say the perfect thing. I've learned that I am perfectly imperfect, just like everybody else.
Yep.
So, and I think it's like peeling away layers of all this conditioning over the years where I was taught you have to be this way, you have to be that way. And as I peeled away each of those layers, the real me that's always been there, she was just hiding, is beginning to blossom, really, is the only word I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, over the break. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And I was just thinking of, young teenagers as well. I was reading an article recently where how much negative influence social media can also have. I was reading about the duck syndrome, where a lot of teenagers are seeing, say for Instagram, all these amazing pictures of people that look like this. They look amazing. Their lives look amazing. So on the outside, they look like a duck, right? Floating smoothly on the water and just, moving along. But they don't realize that underneath in the water, beneath the surface of the water, that duck may be really struggling, right, and pedaling really hard to stay afloat. But the social media, people don't always see the truth of what's really going on in people's lives, and then teenagers or adults even are trying to emulate those lives of perfection. And this is where I felt on the honesty in social media is important, because sometimes you need to share, and people need to see that stuff happens underneath the water where there is struggle and to stay afloat, right? And
it's funny. It's funny you talk about that, because I'm a very interesting social media butterfly, and it's interesting. We were talking at the break about the use of the idea of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and this, chrysalis point that happens where, this happens, and that's, if I was going to, put, mental health or mental illness into a bubble, it would be in this chrysalis point where you're trying to become who you're really meant to be, right? But that idea that we do that we fight. I think teens in particularly, and in social media, like one of the things I do, I sort of have a Facebook policy that if I'm putting things on Facebook, unless there's something very dramatic that's happening in the world that I want to say something about, I'm keeping it very positive. I do that very consciously. And then I write on certain websites, more of my sort of harder thinking things. I use a couple sites called Naomi. I've started to write poetry on, or at least some form of poetry, and then the Mighty, where I'm trying to release my honesty, where also I do that on my site. But that's, if you looked at me on Facebook, you wouldn't see the true me. I mean, you wouldn't see all of the pieces, or you'd have to go deep diving to find them. And I think a lot of people do that, and particularly young people misunderstand that, or use it that way, or use it the opposite way. Like, I actually know a young person who all they post is sort of poor me stuff, what I call poor me stuff. Yeah, looking for that, oh, I'm sorry you're going through that. And what I thought was really cool with what you did, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this one, was when you started posting those videos, people were writing about how proud they were of you, about all of this really, very positive, like, wow, it's so cool you're doing this, it's so good, because it was such a breakthrough, and I felt that way, at least when I was watching it. I thought, wow, that's a real breakthrough point for her, and that made me feel happy, and made me want to go do something similar. So it goes back to sort of that idea that honesty begets honesty, right? That once you release something, it allows for someone else to do that Me Too moment if they choose to.
Yes, for
And
sure.
and maybe they're doing it quietly, or maybe they're doing it and they decide they're going to do it loudly. Like, my sister writes great poetry, and I've tried so hard, because she writes very inner thoughts. I've tried so hard to tell her, just publish it anonymously, come up with a fake name, and she just can't do it.
Yeah,
So I know there's some that can and some can't.
yeah, and some people it takes some time to get ready, and some people it doesn't, and they share it in a space that's safe for them, right? Just like you've chosen where you are sharing,
Right.
how deep you're sharing, right?
And then I think some people are not, going back to that perfectionist. I think many of us who deal in this kind of stuff, who experience sort of coming forward and saying, no, I'm going to be my authentic self. One of the things you have to do that is to say I'm an imperfect person, and anything I do is going to be imperfect. So I'm not going to overanalyze, like, what I'm saying right now, or
Yeah,
what
exactly.
I'm writing. I'm going to write, and I've always found myself to be a emotional writer. So I write what I'm feeling at that moment, and seeing what resonates.
Yeah.
And some people don't like to write. I mean, I've talked to people, and I always say, gratitude journaling. Come up with 3 good things you did that happened today. And can't even do that. It's too much
Yeah,
work.
too much work.
But
That's why I like my gratitude posts, actually. I think
yeah,
it's bringing awareness for people, too, of all the simple things that we can be grateful for.
yeah, not the least of which is that we woke up and we're breathing, right?
Exactly, exactly.
And I agree. That's where, a lot of the times, I think we overthink what we mean by being honest.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean that the real only person you have to be honest with is yourself. And
yes.
that sounds much easier said than done, right? It's not that easy to be honest with ourselves, because to be honest with ourselves, we have to see the warts. We
We
have to
we
see.
do.
And I've told people many times, I say, I can say a lot of things that I've learned, but I don't always practice them. Um, I'm not as good as I tell people to be, because we all are fallible. We all fall into traps, and that's the other thing is you can't self-defeat yourself. And what I mean by that is hold yourself accountable to allowing yourself to make mistakes,
Yes.
allowing yourself to fall and falter.
Yeah, and you know what what has helped me in that part of being more honest and vulnerable is actually doing things on social media and the videos with fun and humor. I
Mm-hmm.
actually, yeah, and even when I invite people to comment or share, I ask them to do it with curiosity and fun and humor, because sometimes we can actually laugh at ourselves, even the things that we think are not that great about ourselves, and learn so much just by enjoying the process too, right?
Yeah, well, and it's a difficult thing. We make it sound easy.
We do.
I struggle to laugh at myself, and again, as I get older, I look back and I go, yeah, that was pretty silly. But you got to get to that point and say, we fight, and we're both married, so we fight with our spouses, and sometimes you look back and you go, what was I fighting? Why am I so pig-headed right now? Why am I so obstinate about this? But
Yeah.
it's a lot of the times, and I like Brene Brown, she'll talk about blame, and she has a great little cartoon video about blame if you look it up on YouTube. It's
Okay.
just hilarious. But it's just really this, what she calls, release of this anger and tension, and it's not really being honest when we blame. But it's a really cute video, and she kind of like what you're saying. The best humor and the best way to help be honest is to be self-effacing.
Hmm.
Laugh at yourself, laugh at what you do, and tell a story. Even if you're telling a story to yourself, you know, what are those stories? What are those moments where you did something that just was so crazy, and you look back now and you go, why did I do that?
Yeah. At the time, it made perfect sense, right?
Yeah, and that's part of life. One of the other things I talk a lot about is we set ourselves up for failure when we see our life as a single journey.
Right.
This is my opinion. That life is not, you were born, you hit midlife, and then you die. You're born, you work, you retire, and you die. It's little journeys, tons of little journeys with beginnings, middles, and ends. And if you really go back and look at your life, it really does work that way. And when you look at it as having these endings, then you can release that moment, and then you can reflect.
Hmm.
But if you're always thinking that your life is one constant, then the minute that there's a disruptor, what I call a disruptor in your life, which there will be,
Of course. Yeah.
then that throws the whole game off, and you can easily fall into that trap of nothing's ever going to be good again,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was the trap that I fell in. I don't know if it's the same you fell in, but if someone told me 6 years ago that I was going to be able to take a trip overseas this summer and see these amazing countries, that I would have said, no, I can't do it.
Mm.
Because I was in that trap. I was trapped in that hole, that made me believe that I was incapable of doing things that I was fully capable of doing. And I think
Yeah.
that's common. I think I actually feel like I know more people like that than less like that. Um, because
Yeah.
as we look at the world, there's a lot of people who are afraid to take that risk, to be that vulnerable. And then the people that are, well, they tend to bubble to the top, and I think that's vulnerability is a major asset, not a detriment.
Hmm.
And that's where I think we make a mistake, is when we believe that being vulnerable, right, is something that is not good, is not a positive. aspect of life.
Yeah, because that's what many people are taught, right?
Right.
Even I was reading an article just the other day on should emotions be taught in schools, like just like ABCs, right?
Yep.
Because even children are not really taught to be emotionally aware and express them and feel them, and that's part of being honest and authentic and vulnerable, right? So I think all that is important too. And I think authenticity, we use the word a lot, and I think it's something that's hard to understand. And I think once you sort of begin to realize you're being authentic, then there's a better grasp. I'm only beginning to understand what authenticity means because I finally feel like I'm being authentic and just saying what I want to say. But I think even that authenticity continues to go deeper and deeper, and it varies. There's some weeks where I write a post and I look at it and I think, oh, that was great, but it wasn't really, really me or what really wanted to come out of me. And there's other days I find nature, when I'm out in nature, then that's when like just my truth comes through and I post it, and that's when people connect to it the most. So even for me, I find there's ups and downs of how honest and vulnerable and authentic I am. But through the whole journey, I think it's going deeper and deeper, finding your true self.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring up nature. One of the things that when I went to this conference, we got to screen a documentary called Nature Matters, which actually one of the writers wrote the Fat Boy Chronicles book and the movie, which they had given me a screening copy of back in 2012, and I'm like, I know you, but how do I know you? And then I went back on my own website. And I'm like, oh, I know you because you sent me this screen. So I got to watch this movie, and it was a documentary about taking these inner city school kids and taking them out to Yellowstone.
Wow.
First, they took them out as a little group a little closer, but then they flew them all out. And they didn't know each other. The kids didn't know each other. And they didn't know nature. And the bonding, because of nature, the bonding they had, and they had to do something artistic. Of course, they had, difficult days where they had to help each other. And I thought it was a wonderful piece about how when we're put into that situation to be vulnerable, which is what we're talking about, how the honesty comes out. Now they were being honest. Now they didn't have a choice. They were in nature. They had to work together. They had to do these things, and that's something that the school wasn't giving them. These kids didn't know each other.
Right.
By the end of the movie, they're best friends, and would help each other out in a crisis if need be. And that was, I thought, an amazing message. And again, that idea that what if we had a class on empathy? What if we had a class on on going into nature and those experiences that we know they're out there, but not everybody gets to do them, where you have to work together, where you have to work with people you might never have worked with before, and find a way to succeed.
What a great experience.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece, and I wish them the best in terms of getting it out there, because when you watch it, you just realize, boy, what have we done by trapping ourselves around computers, around the cities, and not getting out. And so when you talk about getting out, I find the same thing. I find, when I stood in Ireland at the Cliffs of Moher, right, this amazing wonder of the world, how really small life is. How really life is so much bigger than me, and my story and my journey. And I think that's where the honesty comes in, is when we experience, we have to get out of our comfort zone. The really hard part, right? Tell me about that. How do you find ways to get out of your comfort zone? Like what? I know you talk about meditation, and I think meditation again is another misunderstood piece, because meditation can be a walk in the woods. Meditation can be just taking a stroll or alone time, or for me, going to the gym and putting on my headphones and listening to music and doing something for myself, because that's really what mindfulness is about, right?
Yes, yes. It doesn't have to be just a sitting practice. It can be in everything that we do, right? Even you and I having this conversation now can be considered mindfulness and meditation, because we're engaged, connected in doing something and creating something together. In terms of, getting out of my comfort zone, I think meditation has helped me. And a lot of, it's like what you said earlier on, we can help other people because we've been through it. And for me now, the tools that I use with my clients or in groups that I run are exactly what I've used on myself. And they are what have largely helped me to get out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. So things like hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming and even energy healing modalities, they've really helped me come out of my shell and just push myself outside the comfort zone, because that's where growth happens the most, right? I guess I'm one of those people that's hungry for personal growth and just inner growth. And so I think that's what drives me. And just seeing, supporting myself and believing in myself, coming from a time when I was in that low place or in an anxious place, to coming to a place where I do believe in myself and I support myself and I see others supporting me. That helps me get out of my comfort zone. And I think what you said, life is bigger than me, because when I share these stories and do the videos and I realize that other people are going through similar things, it reminds me of, this may sound corny, but the oneness of all of us. Mm-hmm. Right?
No,
and life is totally bigger than me. Life is bigger than me. And I feel like by sharing, I have so much to give and other people receive so much. And then from their feedback, I learn and I receive. So it's a giving and receiving as well that happens by sharing and being honest. And people are so afraid to be honest. And why? Then we're so lonely. We become isolated. And this is where a lot of mental health issues it's one of the risk factors then as well, right? If you are closing down and isolating yourself and beginning to think you're alone and life, this is the worst it's going to be, I'm not going to be able to take that trip or whatever it may be, it just starts that vicious cycle of going downwards into a depression or whatever else.
Right. And if you don't, if you don't consciously say, again, I say this as honestly as I can, not to make it sound dramatic, but for those of us who have been through and come out the other end of mental health or even physical health issues, what you find out is you can't be what you were. You can't think like you did. No. You can't, all these things you did before, you have to find ways to not do. And you have to discover that you're the only one that's going to cure you. And all of us people who are coaches or occupational therapists or psychiatrists or psychologists have the job of helping guide you for your discovery. But I always say it's your discovery. It's not my discovery. I can't tell you what's wrong with you.
Totally. I totally agree with you. I love that you use that word guide, right? Because in the end, it comes from within. Change comes from within. And it's like you said, each person has to be ready to do the change or the thing they want to do.
Yeah.
Just,
and I think,
just like the way you did your speaking engagement. And, and for me, actually, one of my big turning points, actually thinking of that in terms of being ready from the inside, was actually very recent. It was actually this year on my birthday. I decided enough negativity, enough always wallowing in my victimhood or sorriness story or whatever you want to call it, which is probably contributing to depression and anxiety. I made the choice. It's also, and it's not easy. It's not easy, especially when you're in a low, but making that choice that for my birthday, I decided I'm going to give myself the gift of positivity and gratitude. And that's where a lot of my stories are coming from as well.
That's awesome. It's so cool.
That's the best gift I've ever given myself.
Yeah, I kind of almost did the same thing. It was right around my birthday, but I know I don't seem like it. I don't sound like it, but I can be a pretty angry person at times. Like, when I get frustrated or anxious, I get angry. And in fact, I think I just read this article about that, the how anxiety makes you angry versus makes you anxious. And it was really interesting because I'm like, yeah, that's what goes on because I'm having anxiety, so therefore I take it out as frustration. I'm frustrated with myself, so it appears to. So I said, this is what I'm going to work on. And my wife doesn't know what to do with me. She's like, how come you're not getting angry?
That's so funny.
Why aren't you reacting? Like, what's wrong with you? And she is. It's like something is wrong in nature. after 25 years of being stuck with me doing this terrible habitual process, I'm like, I'm just going to try to stay calm and do the count to 10 thing. All of these things you hear about doing, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to count to 10 right now and then pretend. Or like my kids try to goad me into arguments because I was always an arguer with them. And I'm like, not doing it. I just walk away, go upstairs. And then I got this thing from my wife. Why did you walk away? What's wrong?
You're throwing
I just don't
everybody
want
off.
to do it. Yeah, I'm like, everybody is totally thrown off by me. And I'm sure that you're getting the same reaction sometimes, like, who are you? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
and all you're doing is self-discovery. Like, I don't want to be this. I don't want to do this. It's habitual, or it's something that has been residual. And you go, you know what? I'm almost 50 years old. I don't want to be angry anymore. Because eventually that's going to catch up with me, with my heart, or my health, which it has. And so now, plus it reduces stress, which is, I call stress, I just did a presentation, that stress is the catalyst to everything. Everything starts with stress.
For sure.
Stress leads to anxiety, leads to depression. That's the path. And, in the chronic. And so you start by trying not to get stressed so much. So don't stop looking at every situation as, and we do this by not, again, being mindful. And I know you and I both believe this, which is only focus on right now. If you start worrying about the future, you're going to get stressed. It's not the past that's typically going to make you stressed. The past is going to make you feel inadequate or unable to do things, but it's this future thing, like, well, what if I go to this and this happens, or what if I say this and this happens? Just cut all that out, stop all that, and just let yourself be your honest self. So sometimes that honesty for me is I don't want to do something,
right?
And I don't do it. Now that doesn't mean all the time that I don't want to do something, I don't do it. If my wife needs me to be somewhere and I'm doing it, then I say, well, I'm doing it because I want to do it for her. I want to do it, but you can't always get your way.
No, not always. It would be nice, but not always. It sounds like a lot of changing of patterns, right? Is what's going on.
Right, and then what we know from change is that it takes 6 weeks. It is typical change takes 6 weeks to start getting used to it. So, for me, if I'm working on this anxiety, anger issue, and then I blow it, I'm back to my 6-week count again.
Yeah, but you'll be a lot more aware of it now, right? Right. Totally much more aware of it.
And that's the cool part, is once you kind of go, okay, I don't want to do this. That's when you can finally do something about it. But don't expect it. Don't get frustrated when it keeps happening, especially as an adult, because it's habitual.
Yeah.
It's a habit. And habits take 6 weeks to change. And so give yourself a break. Again, getting back to that perfectionism. Give yourself a break.
Give yourself a break. And just so you know, you're not alone, because when I get anxious, I become a lot more irritable and snappy at people. So we are not alone. Just so you know.
Well, it's very common. And I think a lot of people who have high anxiety just hide themselves because they don't, or people see them as not wanting, they don't want to be around them. But again, getting back into sort of this, sometimes try to understand, people can be in pain. People can be, and don't think it's you all the time. Don't think, well, what can I do different?
Yeah.
So, anyway, we have done yet another show, that went by way too quick.
It did.
But I feel good that we were able to talk about this because, again, you impressed me so much recently, and I really look up to you and the way you, approach life and the things that you do. So that's why I think I like having you on the show, because like you said, this is like therapy for me. I mean, I get just as much as I give. And so how can people get in touch with you?
Thank you, first of all, for saying that. I really, really appreciate it. They can get a hold of me on my website, which is my name, avdeepbahra.com. My email is on there as well. And I'm on Facebook too. Business page is facebook.com/avdeep.bahra. So that's where I am.
Yeah, I'll have links on with the webcast.
Thank you.
So thanks for being on another show with me. I'll probably call on you again.
For sure. I love these podcasts. So thank you for inviting me and always making them great.
Well, thank you, and I just have the best time talking to you, because you're just very honest about your own life and why you do what you do, and I think we match that way. So I like talking about it, and hopefully the listeners like listening.
They will.
So thanks for being on another episode of Healthy You, and for everyone else out there, I hope you'll join me on the next episode of Healthy You.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.